There we go.
Justice and Peace in the Teaching of Pope Francis. Hello there. I'm going to look at the teaching of Pope Francis on justice and peace matters in three separate parts. In this, the first of three videos, I want to look at the background of the teaching of Pope Francis in matters related to justice and peace. In the second video, I look at three important documents issued by Pope Francis: Evangelio Gaudium, The Joy of the Gospel, issued in 2013, and that dealt with the repairing of the church; Laudato Si, issued in 2015, which dealt with repairing the planet; and Fratelli Tutti, issued in 2020, which deals with repairing humanity. I've also looked at some of the Pope's other statements to work out what his teaching is saying about shaping our world to be more just. I'll explain how the application of his teaching can transform lives in the third and last video. It's important to stress where the Pope is coming from in building up a picture of his teaching. Some people, including a cardinal or two, have accused him even of heresy, because he couches his thoughts in the promotion of the documents of the Second Vatican Council. The Italo-American theologian Massimo Fagioli wrote that the groups which oppose Pope Francis equate Vatican II with the selling of our Catholic identity and the weakening of the sense of the tradition, by which they mean a tradition stuck in the 19th century, of course. In fact, the Pope shows, as within the tradition of the Council, first, that the reign of God announced by Jesus is, quote, a living and dynamic reality. He says in the preface to a book soon to come out in English that Jesus invites us to conversion, asking our faith to emerge from the stasis of an individual religiosity, or from its reduction to legalism, to become a faith that calls us each to cooperate in the work of God in different situations of life and society. Pope Francis says we must never neutralize the social dimension of the Christian faith, since the kerygma or proclamation of the faith itself has a social dimension, meaning that the life of society will be a setting for universal fraternity, justice, peace and dignity. The second aspect that he shows us is the importance of the Second Vatican Council that Pope Francis is trying to advance in the Church 5 decades after it finished its work, in bringing the Church up to date and emphasising its role in not hating the world, but cherishing it and trying to instill in it Christian values. He thinks back to his student days as a Jesuit novice, when, quote, the Council became the horizon of our belief and of our ways of speaking and acting, becoming our ecclesial and pastoral ecosystem. The Council had simply entered our way of being Christian and our way of being church. I suppose many of us were brought up in this way. I certainly was, under the influence of Scottish Dominicans such as the late Anthony Ross OP, and of Scottish Jesuits such as the late Jerry Hughes SJ, author of the spiritual classic God of Surprises, and the chaplain at the University of Glasgow when I was an undergraduate. The open church and dialogue with the world featured in the Council documents has to be expanded to putting itself, in the Pope's words, at the service of humanity, taking care of creation as well as announcing and working to realise a new universal sisterhood and brotherhood in which human relations are healed of egoism and violence and are founded instead in reciprocal love, welcome and solidarity. I'm going to now look at the move from justice and peace to integral human development. If you look up the website of the dicastery, that's a Latin term used in the Vatican for a ministry. If you look up the website of the dicastery that deals with justice and peace matters, you will notice that it's changed its name. Pope Francis has renamed the former Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, subsuming other dicasteries for charity, refugees and migrants, and healthcare under its name, as a sign of the significance he places in integral human development for solving global poverty and the desecration of the planet. In the document setting up the dicastery on the 17th of August in 2016, Pope Francis said that, quote, "In all her beings and actions, the Church is called to promote the integral development of the human person in the light of the gospel," unquote. To do this, he has said it will be competent particularly in issues regarding migrants, those in need, the sick, the excluded and marginalised, the imprisoned and the unemployed, as well as victims of armed conflict, natural disasters, and all forms of slavery and torture. And I think there were two good reasons why the Pope did this, one seemingly trivial and the other more profound. The seemingly trivial reason was that he knew that the various dicasteries were often jealous of one another's work and would try to undermine one another. By bringing them all under one roof, he eliminated competition. The more profound reason was that, as he said at a conference to commemorate St. Paul VI's encyclical on human development, Populorum Progressio, published in 1967, integral development is the path of good that the human family is called to follow. But what did he really mean by this? Well, the most consistent elaboration of the term integral human development by the Pope is found in his address to participants in a congress organised by the revamped dicastery to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Populorum Progressio in April 2017. In the Pope's opening address, he expands on what he thinks integral human development means today and highlights 5 main points, which are now going to summarise. Pope Francis is emphasising that each person is part of a community and the human family, regardless of race and creed. Second, the human person should not be exploited by economic or political forces. Third, the gap between the rich and the poor has to be narrowed. Fourth, all dimensions of life have to be integrated into a whole which works for the common good. And lastly, development has to take on board that the majority of human beings, at least in the global south, we used to call it the third world, have a faith tradition whose religious values have to be taken into account. Pope Francis also described elements of integral human development on the global stage of the UN General Assembly in September 2015. He strengthens some of the themes such as participation, the means to live in dignity, the environment, the link to the sacredness of all life, and the avoidance of war. He continued his theme about the poorest, who are, quote, cast off by society, forced to live off what is discarded, and suffer unjustly from the abuse of the environment. They are part of today's widespread and quietly growing culture of waste. In terms of participation, he insists that for people to be enabled to escape from extreme poverty, they must be allowed to be, quote, dignified agents of their own destiny, because integral human development must be built up and allowed to unfold for each individual, for every family, in communion with others, and in a right relationship with all those areas in which social life develops: friends, communities, towns and cities, schools, businesses, unions, provinces, nations. Regarding the environment, Pope Francis also reflects in his message some of his insights expressed in Laudato Si, published 4 months before the UN speech. And I'll be saying more about that in the next video. The message adds nuclear disarmament, climate change, the destruction of biodiversity, and the sacredness of life of both humans and other creatures to the advocacy agenda of the Church. Pope Francis includes peacemaking and reconciliation and development practice in the field, as well as listing those an integral human development approach has first to consider, that is, the poorest in the guise of the discarded and unborn, not just the poor who are living and visible. Pope Francis's own cry for the poor reaches fever pitch in his Evangelio Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, which together with Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti we'll look at in the next video.